Welcome to the Purpose for Life podcast, where you have the opportunity to explore pathways to a vibrant, purposeful, and liberated life. I'm Suzanne Robert, your host. I'm the founder of Unifying Solutions, author of It's Deeper Than That. I am the designer of Polarity System Design and The Great Reconnection. I am so excited to have Ruth Milligan here with me today. She's the co-author of the book, The Motivated Speaker. It is one of my favorite books that I've recently read. I've taken notes in it, outside of it, and I've already applied it to my life. And I'm so excited to have you here today and to have people learn about the book and learn about you and have them buy the book and see what else is possible in relationship with the work that you offer. So thank you for being here.
Suzanne, thank you for that generous introduction and glowing reference about the book. There's really nothing more empowering than to hear somebody and the notes they take and the highlights in and out of a book you've written. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. There's a couple things I'd like to have you address about the book, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about things that I harvested from the book that I'd like you to talk about. The first thing is, would you talk about the concept of threshold within the book?
Sure. So a threshold concept is a learning term. So start there. It comes from academia. And it means roughly that it's a space, a liminal space you have to go through in order to really understand something, to make the true connections. It's recursive, which means every time you experience it, you learn something more. It's troublesome. You're like, no, I don't want to do that. That's icky. That's hard. It's transformative. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So, two researchers 10 years ago pioneered this concept of threshold concepts. And a woman at Miami University, whose name is Elizabeth Wardle, has named the threshold concepts for learning to write. And I met her at a conference and she blew me away. Blew me away for several reasons. But the most important one was she agreed to help Blythe, Acacia, and myself, my colleagues and co-authors, name the threshold concepts for learning to speak. So what does that really mean? It means that we've been speaking since we were born. We babble, we mimic, we mirror, we parrot, we pick up the language that's native to us. But how do we and when do we really learn to speak well? And while public speaking 135 or 101 is in your college class, it's really focused on communication, not the communicator. And we chose to really narrow in on what does the person, the human, the spirit need to understand about speaking in their learning, or rather learning to speak well. And we used it through the lens of threshold concepts. We spent about a year noodling, writing, playing with them, testing them on clients, and came up with 6. Now, in isolation, any one of these concepts you might say, well, sure, duh. But if you really look deeper at what they mean and what they present, there are concepts, subconcepts of each one that will be very troublesome for everyone. And we can go through the trouble spots. But when we get calls from clients, we are speaker coaches, we now can almost map anyone's failure or lack of success to them not appreciating and embracing one of these 6. And that was the testing that we did after we wrote them. We did not intend to write a book. We kept saying, we're not writing a book. We're not writing a book. We just want to do better for our clients. We want to learn something to be better coaches. And then we sent a few chapters to a publisher and they said, you have a book. So that's how the thinking and learning that we did turned into a book. That was kind of the accidental part. And I know for a lot of people that have books and are pitching books, that's tricky to hear. And I appreciate that. In our case, because we had Liz as a mentor and we spent a year really thinking about testing writing, it made for a book.
There's one thing you said which really caught my attention. How do we learn to speak well?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I really appreciate about the book is that you don't have to be a keynote speaker to put yourself in the thresholds. It can be about speaking to your partner. It can be about speaking to your community. It can about speaking to your, it doesn't matter, but learning how to speak well is is through looking at the different thresholds and looking at which ones you need to grow in to be able to speak well. And we all can learn how to speak well rather than we just speak. So that's one of the things that I really, really loved about the book for me.
It is an access book, meaning we want
Yep.
everyone to feel access to the concepts. They are not for a professional, but they are for a professional. They are not for the everyday speaker, but they are. I mean, they are for
Right.
and there is something for everyone
Yes.
in the book, whether or not you believe it or not. I've had my colleagues who I've known for 30 or 40 years who are in communication say, wow, if I had known that, or if I had read it that way, or if I had positioned it that way, I would have been a lot better communicator in my company, or a lot better at helping supporting the executives in my firm, or I would have just been a better speaker myself. So we think we've hit an interesting note in the way they are framed. And you don't have to really understand threshold concepts much deeper than what I explained.
Right.
There's a whole bevy of work on it, but threshold concepts relate to absolutely everything. There
Mhm.
are concepts for learning physics. There's concepts for learning to cook. What's one thing, Suzanne, that you have to understand and that can be kind of troublesome if you want to be a good cook? What's one thing, do you think?
That I have to understand to be a good cook. I have to know how to put ingredients together
Correct.
well.
You have to understand measurements,
Yeah.
especially if you want to be a good baker.
Baker, right.
If you want to be a good cook, you have to understand heat, temperature. My son, who's 19, is trying to teach himself how to make a great burger. And every time he does it, it's undercooked and he just doesn't understand the right pan at the right temperature at the right length of time. And it's troublesome for him because he's hungry a lot. He wants, and yesterday he burned a burger on the outside, but it was still raw on the inside. So he's still like,
Learning.
this is a threshold concept around
See.
how do I use heat to get that, towards that learning of making a great burger. So it's an accessible metaphor, but it is one that we use to demonstrate he will be able to cook and he will be able to eat what he cooks. But until he learns that threshold, he won't be a good cook.
Got it. And will you talk a little bit about shaded?
Yes, I would love to. So when we were asked after the book was written, where is your 1 hour keynote workshop? It took us some time to really think about, we didn't want to teach people the threshold concepts in a workshop. But the one thing that I still carried, and the name that I gave it, Shaded Habits, was everyone's got one thing, one, to work on at least. And the way I position it is this. So, Suzanne, let's say you are a starting out of college worker, any environment, and you get invited, you're 23 or 24, and you get invited to speak at a meeting. And every third word you say is, very basic example. And you go through that year or two and no one says anything to you. And you get promoted because you're very technically smart and you have solved problems. And all of a sudden, your boss says to you, hey, I'd like you to go give a talk or a workshop to a larger group or report to an executive group or report to a board.
Mm-hmm.
And you carry that with you, that because no one has said to you in that shaded space, which I call sort of the quiet, darker, just like the laboratory, the staff meeting. No one said to you that might hold you back when you get invited to something that's more illuminated. And those are the calls we get. I just promoted a vice president
Right.
thing and they missed all of the notes about being a great communicator. Will you help them? They had been carrying these habits. They got into them for a reason. Sometimes they have a purpose. Sometimes Sometimes they just stuck. And everyone around them sort of just shrugs and says, oh, that's just the way Ruth speaks. It's okay. Because there's nothing high stakes about what I was doing at those first or 2 or 3 years out. But all of a sudden now there's a business pitch on the line. There's a
Mhm.
finance review. There is a board meeting. There is a testimony in Congress. There is a keynote at a scientific conference. And I've had executives who are hired into jobs and their first talks, this is true, happened up the street a few years ago. Very senior executive hired to a job. 3 or 4 friends of mine called and said, all we did in the back was do hash marks. How many times? He said, My question back was, did they hear anything else? And does anybody have license now or the social contract to help him get out of the knows? Because no one did leading up to that.
So the shaded is the repetition of the you knows or the ums that is unconscious that people have been tolerating and no longer
Sure.
serves them for the next level that they're at or what is being asked of them.
And I would also say it's not just about filler words. It might be, I have so much to say, I have to tell you everything.
Mm-hmm.
It might be speaking really fast and I don't take any breaths. And therefore, when you hear me talk like this, it's really exhausting because I don't take any breaths. And oh my gosh, I'm speaking from here. And I had a lot of things that are going to go wrong in that scenario. And I think it's like not my monkey, not my circus. This person has some bad habits, not my issue. So back to the invitation to everybody who's listening. Bring your consciousness to the one thing that you need to work on. And the way you do that is to record yourself and listen back. Our new mantra around here is while people think public speaking is the scariest, hardest thing to do, listening to yourself speak is far harder.
Mm-hmm.
And as you work with this podcast, for instance, you'll listen back and you'll hear things. You go, oh, do I do that? I don't know what those are because I've listened to
Right.
one. And I've asked every podcast host, are there things that you find that you have improved over time because you have to listen to yourself now?
That's right.
Until this point, that wasn't a requirement. But because you're in a genre where it's recorded and played back, I was on a podcast yesterday, Suzanne, and the podcast host who's been doing it for 14 years said his AI editor takes out all of the filler words and reported to him after one edit, there were 300 filler words in a 30-minute segment. That
That's a
means
lot.
if you do the math, that's 10 a minute, which means that it's about every 6 seconds. You're saying, he said it was unconscionable. So a shaded habit is just something that you have let brew that no one around you is going to tell you because there's no stake in it for them or
Mm-hmm.
you. And then that minute your expertise, your light, your passion takes the stage, you can't take it with you. And the book is one tool on how to find ways out of those bad habits. Not to there's many ways, but the first is make yourself your own audience.
I think that's great. I'd like to talk about your company for just a moment here so people can know what it is that your company does. Ruth is the founder of Articulation, the Storytelling Authority. Let's just say that right here. Also has been a trainer, a coach, and a communication strategist. So if you are liking what you're hearing Ruth say, just want you to know about articulation here.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's very kind.
What's the
There
truth?
are 3 of us. We do work for a very wide range of speakers, from the person who's giving their first conference talk to the person who wants to get promoted to the person who's defending a $10 billion contract. There, anything in the middle on the ends. Speaking, we understand, has many genres, and we speak to many different people, and we have mess in the middle, and we understand all of those things in supporting people through their process. And I would also say that I love the phrase, and I don't know who I'm stealing this from, but when you hire a coach like you, Suzanne, or us, you actually get 2 coaches. You get the coach and you get yourself,
Mm.
because the process of being coached is a learning experience, and you are processing, trying, practicing, and learning new mindsets, tips, and telling yourself to try new things, or else.
Absolutely.
So I think that we also know one other thing that's really important. You will not work at being a better speaker because you woke up one day and say, I want to be a better speaker. You will work at being a better speaker when you have a time and a place and an audience and a consequence that is on your calendar, and you can work towards that. Otherwise, you will reschedule every single appointment. It doesn't have any stake. There's no consequence. And we learned early on to say that, call us back when you have something.
Hmm. That's interesting. There's four things I took from the book that I would like to hear you talk about them. I'll name them and then we can go through one at a time. But one is, and you just talked about it in relationship to coaching, one is self awareness,
Mhm.
relational awareness, which I found really fascinating in multiple thresholds.
Yeah,
It was,
good.
and also practice for transformation. And lastly, is that life is messy and uncertain. So, those are the four things that really stuck with me throughout the six thresholds. So, could we talk about each one of them?
Yeah, pick the one you want to start with.
I want to start with self awareness.
The practice of listening to yourself back is the most bold and guerrilla way to be self aware. I can say to you, Suzanne, I hear you do something, but I could say, watch the video and tell me what you hear. Nothing is more powerful. It is the quickest way to self awareness. The second is your willingness to watch and accept the fact that, oh, is that me really?
Hmm.
There are people in our coaching world that won't accept feedback. And that's why we think feedback is probably the most important of the six concepts. Seeking it yourself, asking for it in the right way, knowing the difference between good and feedback, good and bad feedback.
Yeah.
So there's no correction or improvement without knowing where you're starting and where you want to go.
Thank you. All right. Let's talk about speaking in an uncertain and messy world.
Oh my goodness. Well, even before the world that we have now, which feels a little messier than normal, the iteration that has to happen in your brain to get to what you want to say with these things in mind, the time frame that your host has given you, the genre that you're speaking in, the audience you're speaking to, what question they have, and what your goal is. You've got to constantly be iterating through those things when you're invited to speak. And that's messy because you think you've got something perfectly organized in your brain, that I've got this down. I've been studying this and I've been writing about it and I know what to do. And then all of a sudden I say, why should your audience care? Or do you have enough, too much proof that they don't need to hear everything you know?
Right.
No, I have to go through my 700 slides. Well, they're probably going to interrupt you on slide 3. So let's not waste that time and energy. Messy can also mean you and I have lots of origin stories. We have the origin of who we are as humans. We have the origin of who we are as coaches. We have the origin of who we are as authors, as family, as parents, right? We have lots of, and when you say to me, Ruth, tell me about yourself, wow, there's a lot of different places I could start. I could start something that happened yesterday. I could start something that happened when I was 7. I could start my vision or my future. I could start 10 years out from now. There's so many starting places and finishing places in story, which adds to the mess.
Hmm.
So we can point out many messes, and we all say, especially for those that think they've got it and come to us and are very frustrated, this doesn't feel right and I'm uncomfortable and it's not going well. I say, oh, good. That's really good because that means you're feeling the mess in it. And I need you to feel that to get to the other thing.
Right.
If this is
Absolutely.
a perfect pathway, nothing is linear. Nothing. And if you think it is and you're going to approach it that way, it's going to hurt even more when you get to the mess.
Ruth, one of the things you just did when you were talking, you've done with me before, and I really appreciate it. You ask a question that makes me have to ask myself that question and opens a door that I
Mm,
did not have open.
mm.
Rather than telling me what I'm doing or not doing or what could happen or what couldn't happen, you're very skillful at asking questions to open doors. And I really appreciate that so much. So thank you for that.
That may lead us to the third one, which is that is practice.
Yes, let's go there.
There is no such thing in our minds as a natural speaker. You ever seen someone and they said, "Oh, that person's just so natural. Like they just get it." It just doesn't exist. We come out of the womb not speaking. At some point we learn, we mimic, we parrot. We talked about that earlier. If I was speaking to you in French and you were speaking to me in German, we would not understand each other because that's our practice of speaking or those languages.
Mm,
Building on that, when someone wants to improve, it's like anything. I want to get better at quilting. It is a hobby I picked up in COVID. My daughter Maggie will say, "Mom, your corners are so much better than they were 5 years ago." And if you're a quilter, you know what that means. That I've got all of my like tiny thousands of little pieces. They actually like match up in the right places. And I say it's because I've been practicing. And it's a very simple, I don't need to think I need to overstate it, that practice can come in many forms. We also distinguish the difference between training, practice, and performing. Acacia Strength,
nice.
this metaphor, my co-author. Training means I am learning how the machine works. You're training me on the machine to stitch in a certain way, to fill the bobbin, whatever. Practice is I go on my own and I get in there and I work a lot at it. But then when I'm going to compete, it might be for the perfect quilt. There's no such thing as perfect, but the quilt for a wedding gift. And I want it to look really lovely. I'm not going to make that my first quilt that I've tried in that pattern. There might be a pattern that I haven't tried that's really technical. I'm going to try old scrappy stuff on that pattern first. So with anything, we've got to understand the first time you speak cannot be the time you perform it. There is training of your breath, training of eliminating filler words, training of writing is not speaking. If you
Right.
write and try to speak it out, it will fail you. Writing is a process towards speaking. All of those things are in the training bucket. And then there's the practice. Let's practice getting up in front of an audience. Let's practice a short talk. Let's practice a long talk before that performance moment, if it is performance. Practicing on friends, asking for feedback. We just don't, people say, I don't have time. I actually had a woman tell me yesterday she gave a graduation speech for a business school. She is not a comfortable speaker. She was an accountant most of her life. She didn't have to speak much in big audiences. She clocked, because she's an accountant, she knows this, she spent 200 hours on her 15-minute talk. She doesn't want to do it again. She's going to check the.
How did she, but she cared. That's why she was willing to invest, right?
She cared. She cared a great deal about the school that she was speaking to, which was her alma mater, the colleague she was, the video that would be projected, the ideas for
Interesting.
the students. She cares deeply about developing professionals in her space. And so that all transcended those 15 minutes of wanting to do well and not having a lot of training and practice leading up to it because it just
Right.
wasn't her pathway. So those 200 hours that I spend every day speaking are accumulating for me when I get to be invited to a big talk. I don't have to do all of those 200 hours because I've been doing them along the way. For her, she had to. No, I'm not saying everyone's going to spend 200 hours.
No, but it's interesting that I call it a forsake of what? She had for sake of what? That she was willing to train for. And I
Yes.
think if you don't, I think you said that early on, if it's not on your calendar, you're not going to have a forsake of what, that it's worth investing the time and energy in to get the kind of quality that you actually want at the end of the day. So
She,
that's
she,
interesting.
she got the book and read it in 3 hours, and she said it just brought back so many nervous memories of her practice, and she was very happy she's not going to say yes again. She
I can appreciate that.
cared deeply about the school and the people, and check that box.
This is a sidebar. I had this fantasy when I was young in my 20s that I wanted to build my own home. So I rebuilt a logger's cabin and realized I never want to build my own home again. Do you know what I'm saying? But you don't know till you do it. But and that was a sidebar. I want to get back to relationality, and
Yes.
because it impacted me both when you asked me questions about It's Deeper Than That, my book, and also reading the book in terms of, because I have been practicing polarity for 52 years, exploring it inside my own inner laboratory. So the way I want to come out and talk about it, you said I can follow you, but that's not, other people aren't going to be able to do it. And so it was like,
Right.
oh, what do people need to be able to hear what I know so I can translate it to them? And without talking to you, I would have just come out of the gate with my verbiage, which I would say would be verbiage to people because it wouldn't be understandable or
It's your
translatable.
lab. It's your lab speak.
Yep.
It's your jargon, but it's very clear in your head. Very clear.
Yes.
And that's good. That is really good. You want it to be very clear. But, I take a new remote over to my mother who's 94, and I tell her you got to like click on the HDMI button and connect it to the input too and the this, and she looks at me like I have three heads. I've been using these remotes for 15 years. Very clear in my head, and it took me 22 times to teach her just what breath button to press to get the right thing to do on the TV.
Mm,
And that's just a quick metaphor about like she doesn't know any of the prompts, the language, the how the TV connects, and I had to like really slow down. And not that we're asking anyone to slow down or dummy down what they know. I'm only asking people in the world to make their language and knowledge accessible.
thank you. Because that's what I took away from it. I'm
Yes.
not dumbing anything down. I'm inviting people in and having an invitation for people to come into a world I know is different than dumbing down. And the reframe happened for me from talking to you and reading the book. So I want to thank you immensely.
There's one tip that I would give people in this case is think about your knowledge at the top of the ladder, and that there was 52 years of understanding concepts and language, philosophy and fact and data. And I mean, think about all the ladders on that, the rungs on that ladder. And your audience doesn't have to climb every rung with you, but they may be at a very different rung than A, you want them to be, or B, you expect them to be. So even in the spectrum of sharing your knowledge, make sure, we like to call it laddering, especially for scientists. If they're talking about something very molecular, I don't know what a molecule really looks like. And they're working, and we've coached some people. This was like when my brain really took off on this concept. We worked for molecular scientists who are working for like cellular scientists who are working for, another, like they were three levels down of the kind of bioscience. And I had to string 4 or 5 rounds of questions to get to what does your work really end up doing that I can relate to. Do you support cancer research? Do you support uh, Alzheimer? Like, where do you end up? Where does this kind of, because if I can see that that's where it's ending up, then okay, I get it. But they were like, we don't know. We just support the cellular people and they figure that out. Like our work is the correlation between molecules and cell. I'm being a little basic here, but to me, when I was deeply trying to understand what those scientists were doing, I couldn't. I had no background or language. but I was also charged with helping them give a talk to a lay audience.
Mhm.
So you have to just, your audience is making meaning of what you're saying. And if the audience doesn't have the language that you have, the concepts or that's why we spend a minute explaining this threshold concepts to
Yes.
like, what is it that we're talking about here and how do they fit in and why hasn't somebody named them before? Well, because they're kind of new and the construct of them has become more popular in academics. So that's probably why.
I think that one of the things that when I was reading about everything that you do, one of the things is that you help people find their voice, tell their story, and then get the message across. So I think all those things are part of what's required here and what you're talking about right now. If I want my message to get across, who am I talking to? Right? How can I put myself maybe in their shoes and think about if I'm hearing this for the first time, what would
Right.
be the best way for it to be translated to me? But
Correct.
uh, that's
Trans-
a discipline to do that.
Translating is important. And it also, you might find as you move through this experience, Suzanne, of becoming a more regular speaker, not in your training classes. You are a
Right.
speaker all the time,
Right.
but to lay audiences who don't have the knowledge that you've built for them foundationally. You may also find that metaphors and analogies become your best friend,
Yes.
just like I did and that may feel uncomfortable to you that but any story is a bridge between something you know and care about and you want your audience to know and care about. So the story is the bridge between what I want you to know and care about and what I know and care about. And there's a lot of audiences that may not want to care
Yeah.
about what you have to say. You
It's
would
true.
hope that you're invited to places where you have identified audiences that care. Does my husband want to hear everything I have to say every day about all of my calls? Positively not.
Mhm.
Uh, and if he's had a particularly rough day, tired, hot outside, he's a landscaper, he works outside, comes home, he's really exhausted. I got to read the room and
Mhm.
say, maybe I just need to give him the bottom line today. But if we take a long walk or get in the hot tub or find ourselves on the front porch and we've got, space and time, my audience is likely maybe more interested than if he is stressed and tired and hungry. And that relates to any situation you're communicating to anyone. Read the room. If they fall asleep, maybe you need to wake them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Suzanne, you and I, early in this work 15 years ago, you may or may not remember, shared a client who had a pretty big moment. And it was somebody who was trained to look between people
Mhm.
and not at them. She was a beauty queen, a teen beauty queen. So when she was in a high stakes situation, her shaded habit was that she looked for the first person that smiled at her. And then otherwise, she looked between them. And when the presentation wasn't going well for a whole host of reasons that were largely not in her control, they all tuned out and she missed it.
Mhm.
And she was invited to sit down in the middle of that presentation, a pretty devastating experience. Probably gendered, very much unplanned, so many things. And we still call back the stories actually in the book. And I credit you, Suzanne, with helping her to appreciate what was happening and essentially how to pivot and recover, which was not
Mhm.
a practice that she had available to her before then. So we've
Thank
had
you.
a lot of
We've had shared clients, right?
amazing learnings together
Yeah,
that have carried us through many a moment. So thank you.
exactly. Thank you. Absolutely. Well, Ruth, it's thrilling for me to hear you talk about the work and talk about the book. It's as thrilling as
Oh.
reading the book, and I am going to read the book again. I love
color highlighter.
Well, you should see, I have notes in the front with page numbers on it. I literally need another book. And then I underline things and I turn page corners. And it's fascinating to me because it's such a study for us as human beings to become better. This happens to be thresholds for the domain of speaking, but these thresholds are crucial for us to become better human beings. I really believe. And because speaking is relational.
Yes.
We're not speaking without another, right?
Unless it's just to ourselves before coffee, I like to say.
Right. But it's such a vital, there's so much in this book. I want everyone that's listening to buy this book. And if you are having challenges coming up with speaking, articulation is a great place to come to for a resource for you. Absolutely.
And you can find all the resources about the book and our practice at themotivatedspeaker.com.
And we can add them to the links.
That's right.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ruth. Do you have anything else you want to add here or?
No, we would just continue to we love feedback, and we would love feedback if you've read the book or have other suggestions on how we can continue to improve. That is really our life's goal, is to continue to learn and do better for everyone in concert and harmony and partnership with those that want to do better. And we actually, I'll just leave it with this. The book is dedicated to speakers who trust us to let us into that journey. And Suzanne, you are one of those people. So thank you very much for trusting us to be a part of this very new and very exciting journey for you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And this is the end of Purpose for Life with Ruth Milligan. And thank you for joining us.